Okay, our featured poet for November is Andrew McFadyen-Ketchum. He is an author, editor, and ghostwriter, the author of 2 poetry collections, Visiting Hours and Ghost Gear, assistant director of the Owsley Fork Writers Sanctuary, founder and editor of poemoftheweek.com, the Floodgate Poetry Series, and Apocalypse Now, Poems and Prose from the End of Days, and acquisitions editor for Upper Rubber Boot Books. Welcome, Andrew. We're so glad you're with us tonight and appreciate you being here and sharing your work.
Yeah, thank you. And I think you have a book out or coming out, yes?
We're going to talk about that.
All right.
Later on. Yeah, it just came out.
Congrats before I got
Thank you.
mixed up in other things. Thanks for having me. Okay, I get 20 minutes. Is that right?
Yeah, 2025.
2025. Yeah. Okay. I'm starting the stopwatch now. I'm going to try not to go over. So thanks for having me on. It's good to see so many of you. David, I see you there. Jeff, I see you there. Just my poetry papa. So everything that's about to happen is completely his fault. So I'm going to read from Visiting Hours. It came out the same day that the NBA shut down for COVID. So sort of an odd day to start to release a book. And I've done all sorts of stuff on my own. I haven't actually done a lot of these. So it's nice to do one. I don't know. I haven't been super like gung-ho about Zoom tours, like some people really got into it. I don't know. I just was like trying to make sure my kids stayed alive and things like that. So it's just really nice to come back to the surface and spend some time with y'all. Okay, so I'm going to read the title poem, which is in 8 sections that are a page each. Should be fairly obvious when those sections end and begin. They're numbered. And then I'm going to move on to some new stuff, which I'm excited to share because I haven't shared with anyone. All right. This is Visiting Hours. 1. Then we knew nothing of sadness. No suicide threats or institutional wards. Sleep came naturally to us in our beds. And when I dreamed of Mary. But on the phone, she was all stories of group therapy and the crazies who listed down the long pharmaceutical hallways, the fluorescence strain when shockwaves flagged the lines, how, when the twin red oaks bled their shadows past the gate, another night came calling. Still, when the doctor's opinions turned and Mary came home, the ward's work became our own. Antipsychotics and insomnia dreams, the list of sharp objects we checked our world against. She shaved her head and called it liminal, slept by day and shook coffee to her mouth by night, sinking deeper and deeper into the diamond blue oracle of her laptop when all but the clocks were sleeping. When finally she did it, a year had passed in that bedroom we swore not to enter. Dim shafts of dust and beams through the blacked out casements. The instructions Mary scrawled in black Sharpie across her mirror. Wake, brush your teeth, stop thinking such things. 2. No one prepared me my entrance into that ship of lost souls where Mary slept. No one taught me to mask each step I took across the checkered linoleum, or that it wasn't wandering, that path of pea gravel and weeds that wound the backlot's maze, of 50-year boxwoods and a crumbling slave wall, that path the doctors had Mary keep. Pulling handfuls of bluegrass and henbit, I brought her back to childhood's game of hands. I turned her palm over in my palm, traced her birth line with the tip of a finger, and read the will of the thumb, said, "You will name your many children for saints," only to watch her turn her hand into a fist around another clump of thistle. What could I do? I, nothing but a boy dangling before her, searching for the words to summon the girl I once knew from the girl she had become. Her hair already turned the dun of the ash of her cigarette. Her eyes turned all hours to the closed doors of the earth. Her down-turned lashes, the wings of some darkly sane and wing-broke bird. 3. Her oversized t-shirt, her paint-spattered jeans, bras hung like fourth notes from the bedpost, prism bars of light, then dark, then light again cast by the south-facing window. None of it seemed real. I, a member of the perfectly sane, allotted his single hour. So I took it all in. The displaced game pieces and faded carpet, the gowned residents hugging the ward's warped walls, the courtyard where I found her in a sanctum of smoke, standing in the doorway I held open. I watched a rhombus of daylight scroll across Mary's star-turned face, her eyes fluttering, the hardback she'd been reading perched like a little roof on the house of her chest. When I went to her, I went quietly, careful not to disturb the garden's foundation of vines, the bird bath poised on its pedestal. What else could I do but watch her sleep? The lives of stray hairs moving across her face, a flicker of dream beneath her lids, the waterless water fountain. 4. The doctors told them, keep an eye on your daughter, but she need not stay here. Watch her take her pills 3 times a day. Let her rest all day in her bedroom. But when she descended the carpeted stairs that linked her world to ours, her parents said she stumbled like an injured angel in her nightgown down that handful of steps and gazed about the kitchen and its objects, the Eiffel Tower pepper shaker, the checkered tablecloth, as if she'd entered a stranger's house. That's when John posted his list of chores to the refrigerator door, and Beth began to plan Mary's return to college. The writing gig at the local paper, not quite enough to fulfill the dean's requirements. So came the radical post-feminist papers she wrote for her distant learning course. So came the late-night journaling sessions that lasted well into the afternoon. I am a freight train, she wrote in perfect block print in a margin of a notebook. I am a freight train, she scribbled on a rolling paper. I am the rain, I am inane. I may not fly like a great blue crane, but I am not insane. I am not insane. I am not insane. 5. Blame the larium. Blame the bad pills, blame her thin blood and vanishing periods, blame the spasms in her back, how she could crack her neck like the snap of green twigs in flame, blame the drugs they had her take, blame Nepal, blame malaria and the faulty doctors, the shrink with his bifocals and beard, the mosquito for its infected proboscis, blame the military for its failed recipe, blame bad blood, blame lucid dreams, blame belly aches and the night nurse, her concoction of tablets, blame linoleum, blame white sheets and matching curtains breathing in and out of the window, blame the ticking space heater and the stars' poor alignment, Western medicine's failed search for an antidote, blame nausea, blame vomiting, blame diarrhea, blame dizziness, loss of balance, blame stomach pain, muscle pain, difficulty falling asleep, difficulty staying asleep, difficulty breathing, blame the rash and seizures, blame the rash of seizures, blame rain, blame the sun, blame a loss of feeling in the toes, confusion and forgetfulness, blame the radio's bad signal, blame passenger planes, power lines, transformers, blame shaking in the arms and legs, panic attacks, blame hallucinations, blame the parking lots, the parking garages, easy access, blame the voices no one heard but she, blame visions, blame waking dreams and miscommunications, blame the thoughts of suicide, blame her legs that did the leaping, blame the beautiful, blame the mosquito, its hunger, blame Nepal, blame the larium, blame anything but me. 6. Who's to say A star-spread sky didn't warp or flex above the foothills that night, or that any kind of light at all broke free of the clouds to knife its gloom across the snowbanked rooftops and empty lots of Blacksburg, Virginia's 3 a.m. All I know for sure is the clamor the cordless made from my desk, the gin and tonic headache I woke to, my sister's voice like static. This was my final semester of college, hawking Rolling Rocks and hoagies to professors in ROTC at a deli a block from the power plant. On Fridays, I'd kneel in rubber gloves to cleanse the massive industry of steakums and craft powdered Alfredo for an extra under the table $5. Then I'd clock out to fight the gales of wind that gathered speed between the dormitories and halls before finding my seat around the conference table of amateur theorists. But I have no idea what 3 a.m. this was, or whether the westerlies howled or bayed as my sister's words caromed the complicated wound of my ear. All I know for sure is how slowly the receiver fell from my hand, the dent it left in the hardwoods, how the lights in the hallway snapped to life, and my roommates floated from their bedrooms in their nightclothes like angels. Who knows what else happened that day? I've read a platoon of American boys led a night raid on Kabul and came back men. I have no doubt the thermometers ruptured at the county airport with cold. Somewhere, it's certain God made another of God's billion daily revisions of the world. But what did any of that matter anymore? All I could see was you, the ledge, all that snow, your mother clenching the blue bed sheets in her sleep, your father holding his head in his impossible hands, the calls he has to make. 7. That first morning, I wandered my apartment as if I'd never listened to the warming of its foundation or the buckling of floorboards, the wan dust and debris of everyday life floating in columns of daylight through the east windows. When the train whistle cooed its sluggish way through town, a motley crew of wintering crow lifted like paint fumes from my backyard. When a roommate's alarm erupted, a shower head burst to life and the coffee maker kept insisting, 12 a.m., 12 a.m., 12 a.m., 12 a.m. What else is there to say? What else recall? That first morning, it wasn't Mary that haunted me or her leap, but her father's words, diffuse and malformed through the telephone. That voice once so certain, I held to my ear. I sat on the bed. I did nothing. I said nothing. I did everything I could. 8. Kicking pebbles on the shoulder of the highway, I tested the wind's direction with a finger. The winds that came spoke of hoarfrost and fields. Commerce rumbled by on I-40. The street lamps burned their fishhook of light before the red brick Victorian, its locked double doors, its 100 shuttered eyes. Not a family member, not a lover, no guest welcome past visiting hours. I watched the night watchman doze in his A-frames of spit cups and hustler. I observed the roosting of birds, the library of stars above the trees that lined the county road, where I drafted my path over the high outer wall and through the just mown grass, the method by which I'd scale the sanitarium, tap a finger on her window, whisper, Mary, let me in. I still don't know why I've kept her so long in this house for the somewhat less than sane, where they kept her a mere 24 hours, a 2 hours drive from her bedroom, where she hid herself the year before she died. That December home from college, I'd park across the street from her house, warm my hands by the heat of the Nissan Sentra's 4 cylinders, and wait to catch a glimpse of Mary in her window. More than a decade since, she killed herself. Still, I don't know why. She spent a year in college. She climbed the mountains of Nepal, helped raise schools for the poor. In the one picture I've kept, she smiles at the camera. Sometimes a fly catches on the glass in the frame. Sometimes I think I catch her blink. And what would you do differently? Mary asks, sights trained through the passenger window on that growing square of light that could be the window of the imagined sanitarium, could be the window of her bedroom on Wyoming Ave. She's blue-eyed here. The breeze is honeysuckle and sex. And even though she knows I've no answers, knows when I say nothing, I say everything, she places a finger to my lips to freeze me in that game of what ifs I've been playing since college, then departs to follow that brick path back to herself from the mailbox to the stoop, through the sanitarium's arched entryway, past her kitchen and down the cinderblock hallway to her bedroom, while I'm stuck here, eyeing that figure lighting the window, a chest x-ray or the moon, the girl I loved, the girl I thought I knew. So that's visiting hours. And I was crying the entire time. I don't know if you could tell. That was intense. You can sort of see why when COVID struck, it wasn't exactly the best book to go on Zoom tour with. It's just very sad. But what's really neat is that one of the things that I did do was I submitted it to tons of post-publication prizes, largely at the urging of my fiance, because I was sort of, Jeff knows me pretty well. I was not thrilled about spending more money to get a book prize that I was never going to win, because who reads these things? And it won a bunch of them because I think, it spoke to people. So it's actually going into a second printing, which is pretty awesome. If you don't have a copy, just go to my website, click on books, visiting hours, and you can order it from me and I'll sign it and I'll send you a nifty, hold on. Yes, a nifty moon button. I don't know how well you can see that, but I'm quite a sort of amateur moon photographer. And so there are moon photographs throughout the book that are all mine. So it's got my photography as well as poetry. So thank you for, that's a tough read. I don't know what it's like to hear. Okay, so I'm going to completely, I've got like 8 minutes left or something. Okay, I'm going to completely change up things and I'm going to do something I've never really done before. And that is read a brand new poem to you that has had one round of very simple edits. And it was, why not? Okay. This is called Natural Dangers. The first time I kissed a girl, I was sweating beneath the east stairwell of Bass Junior High after yet another basketball practice where I didn't make a thing. She was all woman, I all boy, yet there I found myself, coaxed I don't recall at all how, by an 8th grader into the domain of the nearly post-pubescent in the red glow of the red exit signs that opened onto Delaware and 52nd Ave. 2 days later, she was teaching me in her mother's bed on Nevada how to make out, which seems even now strange nomenclature for the agreed upon meeting of tongues within the meeting of mouths, which, so far as I can remember, wasn't really agreed upon at all, at least by me, but was strangely welcome as her gymnast tongue turned somersaults over the pommel horse of my mouth, her hands pressing my hands hard into parts of her body I couldn't even name, let alone conjure metaphors for. Even now, 25 years later in my writing chair, her mother at work, my mother a mere 5, maybe 6 blocks south, in our kitchen, assuming I was off playing dodgeball with the other boys in the neighborhood or hunting the shit creek that salamandered beneath the I-40 overpass for leeches, when she stopped mid-cartwheel kiss and fished from her mother's bedstand the gold medallion of a Magnum condom and said, I shit you not, I use this because I like my men big. Oh, how I ran. sprinted headlong from her mother's bedchamber like a wild thing escaping wildfire through the living room where her autistic sister played with the Rubik's Cube I'd brought to entertain her. One judge or another on TV passing down his or her sharp edicts as I yanked open the back door and leapt, a la Carl Lewis, long jump, 1992, Barcelona, all four rickety wooden steps that linked that slumped yet potpourri perfumed double wide to earth, and back into the alley it abutted, where, regardless of all the natural dangers of our most unnatural human world, I knew at least nothing was expected of little old me. You laugh now, so do I, but think of it. One day I'm kissing a girl for the first time after practice. The next I'm expected to be man-sized, and perhaps, I assume I never asked, mildly hirsute, and in the clutches of an 8th grader's knowledge. What exactly was I so afraid of? This was years before much talk of HIV in neighborhoods like Sylvan Park in the 90s, and how strange that I feared a girl striving for safety. Perhaps it was the gold implication of that Magnum wrapper. Gold can only be encased in gold, and what was I? Perhaps it was the name itself, Magnum PI. I'd seen the show and knew I had years to go before I would scratch a bed of chest hair sprouting from a Hawaiian shirt while chasing down white-collar criminals in my red Ferrari. Wasn't the 357 Magnum the gun the Joker used to slay my hero's mother and father beneath the piebald moon? Wasn't Magnum one of the malt liquors preferred by the alkies who woke up each morning in the gutters of the very streets I sprinted, wild-haired and 11 and God blessedly still alive? Once I'd rounded 52nd and Elkins, the dogs who'd stretched the full lengths of the chains to snap at my heels as I darted past, having returned to their chain link quietude, I slowed, out of breath and heaving, to a walk, tucking my hands into my jeans pockets as I descended the hill that led to the creek that sat just below the floodplain where I knew I would be a boy again. That was when I remembered the Rubik's Cube I'd brought her sister as, admittedly, a distraction. I could see it in my memory in her hands where she sat in the couch, her sister calling after me from her mother's boudoir. My mother would most certainly ask what had become of it, that codex of color and alignment and pivot points locked in a puzzle the size of my hand. She'd given it to me for my 11th birthday 7 days prior. I considered for a moment returning for it, saw myself knock on the back door and step off the stairs back onto the blacktop with my hat in my hands, then thought better of it and kept walking toward water as I began to concoct the lie that would explain its disappearance. I didn't know what the lie would be, but I would think of something. I would think of something. Okay. Did y'all laugh at that? I mean, I was laughing the whole time. I thought it was hilarious. Okay. I think I'm going to squeeze in 3 more poems. Okay, so my 3rd manuscript, it's under consideration at Stephen F. Austin University Press, which means I sent it to them and they've said absolutely nothing in return, but that's who published my 2nd book. And I'm hoping they publish it. It's called Fight or Flight. I was married for 10 years, got a divorce, went on a typical, camping trip to discover myself, and then got myself back to Karen, who we went to high school together at Hume Fogg. And so it's the sort of story of how that's all happened. Now I have 3 stepchildren, one of whom turned 3 today. So, okay, I'm going to read 3 and then I'm out. Okay, the first one, this is On Earth. If the dead don't know how on earth to live, how on earth can the living? Mistakes stack up like nights. We get in over our heads no matter whether or not we truly love the ones we're with. No one asks to be dropped into the glass like this. And though we do not rehearse our deliveries, we find ourselves delivered nonetheless into these thin-skinned vessels we call the self, in which we love and lose and love and lose again and again, and must learn to trust the stars are fixed in the ether despite our first fevers, our mothers either wringing their hands over us in our cribs through the night, or trusting our illness burns brightly, yes, but nowhere near as brightly as us. All right, this is serious in February. That first night on the road to nowhere, the man woke 3 times in the night, warm in his mummy bag and Uggs, next to the fire ice, cold in its ring. Frost cracked as he rolled onto his back to peer at what woke him. A wobbling blue light high in the southern sky, too massive for heavenly body, too still for space station or plane, so bright it washed out the moon, otherwise white hot on the horizon. The man didn't move a muscle as he gazed at the night. The man didn't wiggle out of his bag into the colder than forecasted cold he could read his breath by. He did not retrieve the field glasses from the car his father gifted him before his journey for peering at the stars. The man, instead, did nothing. He took it all in the way he'd always wanted, but rarely could. The man breathed and breathed and breathed, then rolled back onto his side to re-enter his night of difficult dreams. Okay, last one. And this is for my little baby girl who turned 3 today. This is catch and release. When finally it was time for our child to arrive, I was not allowed to enter the hospital room reserved for those with your last name. Instead, I went fishing, stayed by the phone all that afternoon as I hunted for those who breathe water, biding my time until your text that would tell me the little girl I'd call daughter had been born. My friends on the Buffalo tried to hide their perplexion. They could not understand why a man without children could fall so in love with a woman expecting a child not his. Is any child really ours? And how rare is it really for a man to dream of cradling the woman he loves as she nurses the child who has only just become? I caught a 23-inch smallmouth that day, biggest catch of my life. 5 minutes of struggle just to catch a glimpse of that Goliath of the shadows. Another 10 before I held it aloft by the gills for a picture, then prepared it for release. The metaphor's lost on neither of us. That little girl born that morning, the exact same size as that smallmouth I gave back to the water at day's end. Truth is, I ate that fish, brought home 4 fat fillets I cooked 4 different ways for that indie mama. Pan-fried, deep-fried, broiled, and grilled, the meat my lover's body took in fed back to her child, our child, she insisted, as she lay on the bed that might as well have been a sandbank of the river that child came from, body exhausted and healing, while we held our baby in our arms. Big fish, blinking up at me, her life in my hands, my lover holding my hand, this child a gift of the water we hold hard to every day and must learn one day to let go. That's it.
Wow.
That
Thank
was
you.
wonderful. Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you.
So much. That was really, really great. I love
think
that
you-
last one.
You ran the gamut of, I think we hit every emotion, right?
Yeah, that was my goal. Sorry, I think I went like a minute over. Sorry.
No, you're fine. It's
Yeah.
worth it.
Yeah.
Timing is math, and that's not necessarily the part of poetry we pay attention to. Meter will count, but time, we're not so, not such sticklers. All right, well, I did want to, before we